So good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for the My IKC Saturday webinar series, Study in the U.S., brought to you by Gen Next and the International Knowledge Center. We are so excited to have you with us today and to have our presenter, Kate Dobson from IUPUI, talk to you about scholarships. Before we get started, just a quick word about Gen Next Education and the International Knowledge Center. So we are a US-based company, Gen Next, and the International Knowledge Center is a Gen Next initiative located in Bangalore, India. So what do? We work with high schools, we work with families, free of cost to families who are trying to explore their study abroad options. And the reason we exist is because there's so much information out there, too much information in some ways, and then not enough information. So what we want to do is connect you with good information, and we really believe that that means connecting you back to the source, which is universities. For the US side, we work with universities that are trying to bring Indian students to help connect them to you. So as part of that today, we are bringing to you, our presenter is from IUPUI. These are our current partner institutions. And that just means that we know more about them than we do some other institutions. But we will work with you regardless of where you want to study. But we do know more about our partner institutions and give them opportunities like doing things like this webinar. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenter, Kate Dobson. She has been all over the world multiple times. She's the Assistant Director of International Admissions at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. She has been with that office for 2 years, but has been involved with international for many more. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kate.
All right.
Kate, thank you so much for speaking with us. The floor is yours.
Excellent, thank you. And you can hear me? I unmuted myself correctly. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Yes? Okay, good. I was waiting for that confirmation. Welcome everyone. Good evening, everyone overseas, and thank you so much for joining us. As Evelyn said, my name is Kate Dobson, and I'm at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, which we also call IUPUI for short. So I will talk to you about scholarships and about just kind of how to fund your studies. And I think Evelyn said it perfectly, that there's so much information and not enough information, and it's really hard to sort through. So hopefully this will be a good foundation, and then Evelyn, Ben, and Yashika, and myself can help answer some questions at the end. I do want to say a quick note about the U.S. election. Obviously this week we elected a new president, and we have some concerns from our international students, both here already in the U.S. and those abroad who are thinking of coming to the U.S. And I think with I understand why students have concerns, because there's been some pretty negative rhetoric on the campaign trail. So on behalf of universities in the U.S., I'd like to assure you all that our international students are highly valued and welcomed, and they're important members of our university communities and of our communities outside of the university as well. Just this week, there were several emails sent out by the administration at Indiana University and at IUPUI, which is part of the Indiana University system, from high-ranking officials within our system, assuring students that we're here for you, and that we have channels to report any concerns. We have counseling available. We have safe spaces where you can process the election. I think that the cornerstone of U.S. higher education is open, respectful dialogue as well as thinking critically about issues, and also hearing from diverse opinions and people with diverse backgrounds and experiences, and none of that is going away. And those are some of the reasons that we so highly value international students. So I just like to say that we work very hard to make our campuses safe, inclusive, and welcoming to all, and that is not going away. And also, of course, any other questions you have now or at any point during your process as you apply, you can contact any of us and we'll help you through. So, to talk a little bit about IUPUI, to shift the focus here, we are located in Indianapolis, Indiana. You can see the little star there. We're in an area called the Midwest. And we're a large public university with over 300 academic programs. We have a large school of medicine on our campus, and we're located in the city. So students have an urban experience here. An interesting, the reason that we have this crazy name is because it's an agreement between both Indiana University and Purdue University. Some of you may be familiar with Indiana, may be familiar with Purdue. They both came together in the 1960s to create one campus in the capital city of the state of Indiana, which is IUPUI. So what that means is students will earn either a Purdue degree or an Indiana degree, depending on what they study. It's a really unique model. A lot of our students like it because they get that degree that has a bigger name, but they study on a campus that's within the city where they have easy access to internships, amenities, jobs, culture, community engagement. So IUPUI, as I said, we have a large medical school, so many medical programs, including public health, are offered on our campus, as well as engineering, business, science, art and design, liberal arts. Again, as I said, it's a large university, so we have a lot to offer and a lot of diversity as well among our student body. So that's IUPUI. Moving on to funding your studies in the U.S. So first, I will ask a few questions. I'm wondering if you know what is the most expensive cost associated with studying in the U.S.? What is the second most expensive? And then lastly, what is one item that students tend to think is not a necessary cost but is of essential importance? So I don't think I'll force you to offer your answers here, but take a couple seconds, think about these, what you think they may be. And now I will show you the answers. You may have guessed that the most expensive cost is tuition. You may have guessed that the second most expensive cost is living expenses. You may not have. And then lastly, the one item that students tend to think is not necessary but is of essential importance is health insurance that you must have as an international student in the U.S. So moving on to talk about the costs associated with studying in the U.S., I'll give you a list here. This is not to make you panic, but to kind of give an overall view. You know, we think about tuition, we think about room and board, but there are also application fees. Some of you may be thinking about that and maybe thinking about test fees if you're already preparing for your TOEFL or for your SAT, for example. You'll have to pay certain fees for your visa, to the SEVIS system, and then, of course, tuition, room and board, books and supplies, travel to the United States, travel within the United States, particularly if your campus is farther away from an airport, you may have to have extra costs to get to your campus from the closest airport, for example, and then health and medical insurance I mentioned, and then personal expenses, of course, everything else that you want. So these are all the costs that we're talking about. So now we'll talk about how to minimize some of those costs. We'll do that by looking at 6 different things to consider. First, starting with tuition and fees, then scholarships, because you cannot look at scholarships without also looking at tuition and fees. And then our last 4 items here are supplementary things to consider to lower your costs. So advanced placement, the living costs of where you are working and saving. So we will get to those. First, as far as tuition costs, if you look at that first bullet point there that says public institution versus private institution versus community college, just in case people aren't familiar with this concept because it works differently in different countries, public universities in the US are not free to attend as they are in some other countries. Public universities receive state funds, which means that they're subsidized, the cost is subsidized for residents of the state. So IUPUI is a public university. I could attend for a lower cost than someone who lives in the state of Illinois, for example, because they aren't because they're coming from a different state. Private institutions will be the same cost for everyone, no matter if you're from the state, if you're from another state, or if you are from another country. So public institutions typically have lower tuitions. Private institutions typically have higher tuitions. They sometimes can offer higher scholarships also, not necessarily. But it's important if you get, let's say, a $7,000 scholarship at a public university and then a $15,000 at a private university. Of course, the $15,000 sounds great, but at the end of the day, you'll have to look at the total costs because it may end up being equal, or the public may still be a little bit more affordable. It may not. These are things to consider. So when you're looking for scholarships, don't solely focus on the scholarship amount. You would have to compare the scholarship amount available to the entire cost of the university. Community college, I've written on there, that's a two-year college, so much, much more affordable. Typically, it's several $1,000s a year. But the catch there is that it's usually non-residential. There's no research that goes on. So depending on your goals, while it may save you some money, it may put you farther back from your academic goals. It may not. It depends on the specific person. But one thing to keep in mind, while the cost is so low, if you do get higher scholarships, typically the higher scholarships start from your first year of university. So if you do community college for 2 years and then transfer to a 4-year university to finish your bachelor's, the scholarship available may be lower than if you had started your first year at the 4-year institution, depending on your grades and your test scores. So something to keep in mind. Second bullet point there are fees for certain academic programs. So I studied liberal arts. My education happened in the classroom, in internships, in dialoguing and working in the community. But if you're studying engineering or maybe nursing or something medical, you may have a lot of labs, or science, for example, natural sciences rather. So there may be extra fees to pay to cover some of the labs. So that's something to consider. Lastly, that flat rate tuition versus tuition by credit hour. Again, without knowing everyone in the audience, some people have really sophisticated knowledge of our credit hour system. Others say, what are you talking about? This is really confusing. So typically in a semester, students will complete anywhere from 12 to 18 hours in order to be a full-time student. And you have to be a full-time student if you're on an F1 visa. So you can see that some universities will charge just by the credit hour. So you're taking 12 credits, you're paying $12,000. Now for the universities that charge by a flat rate, no matter how many credits you take, you're paying the same amount. So if you're only taking 12 credit hours, you're going to pay for more. However, if you're taking 18 credit hours, you're actually still paying only for 15. So it's as if you're getting a course for free. Courses are typically maybe 3 or 4 credit hours. You may be getting a course for free every semester, depending on what you can handle as far as your course load within your academic plan. So again, just another question to ask. It may seem really detailed, but looking at a scholarship over $15,000 a semester versus a scholarship over $18,000 a semester, for example, because those few $1,000s will certainly add up. Moving on to scholarships, I first want to start with financial aid. Universities use this term differently. Often it can be used to mean any sort of scholarship or funding that a student can get. Sometimes it can be used to mean FAFSA. So FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. I hope I got that right. And essentially, it is not available. It's federal funds that would go to U.S. citizens, not available for international, meaning F1 students. So another important point here is that every university defines international differently. If you're a U.S. citizen living abroad, one university may define you as international. A university like IUPUI would still route you to our U.S. undergraduate admissions office because you're a U.S. citizen. And if you're a U.S. citizen, even if you've spent your entire life abroad, you are still eligible to apply for the FAFSA to get some federal financial aid. But again, F1 students are not able to apply for that. So something to keep in mind as you look through the resources available. Some students have asked me about the College Board CSS profile. I tell them I don't know too much about it because only certain universities are listed on this profile. I think it has to do with kind of an agreement between the universities and the CSS profile. So if you use this as a tool, I think that's certainly an option that you can use. But do know that it is limited. This does not include all possibilities for scholarships. So as far as where you can find scholarships, I mentioned the CSS profile basically just to say, hey, this exists, but it certainly is not comprehensive. Here are some other ways that you can look for scholarships and some other categories of scholarships. The first is need-based, which of course means it's based on your financial assessment. This, I think you're probably going to find more often in private institutions than public institutions, although there are always exceptions. Merit or admission-based is probably going to be the easiest for international students to find. That's based on your GPA, your grade point average, and on your test scores. So maybe TOEFL, maybe SAT, maybe ACT, maybe a combination. We have experts either in our offices or there are outside organizations that universities will refer you to get your transcripts, your certificates, your boards, all of your academic documents credentialed and converted to the 4.0 GPA scale that we typically use in the US. So using that, we would be able to tell what your grades are and whether or not you qualify for a merit or admission-based scholarship. You could have the equivalent of $1 million in the bank. It doesn't matter, you'll still get a scholarship if you qualify under this because it's solely based on your academic performance. Now the third type of scholarship, competitive, there are a couple different categories within this one. Athletic scholarships do exist. They typically are highly competitive, and anyone to be considered for an athletic scholarship, you should be competing on a national or maybe even international level. So very, very high level competition. And it's important to know that there are a few divisions of athletics within the US. So some basketball at a Division I university such as IUPUI, those students are fully funded. They get funds for everything. But other sports at IUPUI, you may just get a partial scholarship. So basically for athletics, it's going to be challenging and you have to be a top athlete. So keep that in mind if you're considering athletic scholarships. Honors colleges are a specific institution to the US, I believe, where you, let's say you want to study mechanical engineering. You come into the university, you can still study mechanical engineering, but you are also in the honors college. What that means is that you are maybe taking a couple extra credits or maybe an extra course per semester that gives you a deeper look into your field. Or, for example, at the Honors College at IUPUI, there are several leadership courses that you can take. So students are studying their discipline and they're also getting kind of this augmented academic experience in a smaller community of like-minded students and with a higher scholarship. Now, the catch, of course, is that because it's an honors college, students who gain entry must have very high academics. So we are looking for very high GPA and high test scores as well. So if you're scoring that high, it's a very good chance that you could be in an honors college and you could thrive in an honors college, and you may also get some funding from that. Lastly, continuing student scholarships. That means once you're already here at the university, you may be able to, let's say you finished your first year as a math major, the math department may have a special scholarship for you. Maybe even when you apply your first year, the math department may have a special scholarship. Probably won't be large, but a couple $1,000s here and there certainly makes a big difference. So these are things to be really connected to your department, to your academic school, to your university, to find out what scholarship opportunities exist. Because usually there are many opportunities, it's just kind of sorting through them to find which ones you qualify for. That is the time-consuming part. I've had a lot of students ask about full rides. A full ride, of course, being when all of your tuition and all of your living expenses are paid, so you have to pay nothing. This is certainly possible, but it is for the top students. So some universities aren't able to offer full rides. Some are, but maybe they offer only 5 a year to international students, for example. So yes, they do exist, but they are not, you have to be very competitive to get one of those. So here is a big list of resources. The webinar, as I believe Evelyn mentioned, will be recorded, so you'll be able to come back and take a look at some of these resources. Click on the links. There's an assortment of Education in USA, which is run through the U.S. Department of State, Amid East, for particularly students in the Middle East, Gulf area wanting to study in the U.S. There are also some examples. Some private companies or corporations or nonprofit organizations may have specific scholarships for students, so that's something you can consider. And then we have a few other kind of big players in the international education world that have just lists of different types of scholarships. That last one, the CollegeBoard Big Future website, that's, if you haven't used it, of course it's a College Board tool, and you can sort by how much scholarship the university provides, where the university is, what programs they offer. So it's a comprehensive tool to narrow down your choices and see what is a possibility for you. So that's a good one to maybe start with. But beware of scholarship scams. And here I have to give a shout out to Miss Evelyn, because she gave me this picture of the cat, and it's perfect, because this is how it feels when our students are taken in by a scholarship scam. If you hear something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is, unfortunately. And unfortunately, there are people out there who will say, if you pay me $200, I'll give you access to all of these scholarships. Probably not true. A good way to kind of vet those, if you happen to have, I'll go back a slide, Education USA, that first bullet point. Again, they're through the Department of State, and their mission is to help students who want to study in the U.S. and help universities in the U.S. talk to students overseas. So they usually can kind of vet and tell you if scholarship is legitimate or not. So I will move along to Tania. Tania is a student in our office. She's one of our international student ambassadors. So that means that that's her campus job. We pay her an hourly rate to talk to prospective students and tell them about what it's like to study at IUPUI. Tania is originally from Dubai and came to us a year and a half ago here at IUPUI, and her older sister also studies with us, so we've been very lucky to have Tania and her family as part of our university. So I asked her, Tania, you're a student, I'm going to do this webinar. I like you, so I won't ask you to wake up early on a Saturday, but can you give me some of your tips that I can share with the participants in this webinar? And she gave me some really fantastic tips as a student. She gave me 4 different things to share with you all. She said, number 1, any scholarship is worth it. So I think that's an excellent point. Even if you get, let's say, a $5,000 or $7,000 scholarship, maybe that doesn't sound like a lot depending on the total price, but it adds up over 4 years. That could be $20,000. That's a lot of money, you know. $28,000. That's a lot of money. So it's certainly don't discount smaller scholarships. Secondly, she suggested that you get a list of all the deadlines of scholarships of universities that you're interested in, print it out or write it out and stick it up on a list in your room. So for example, at IUPUI, for our honors college that I was talking about, which comes with higher scholarship amounts, our deadline is November 15th. So for any students that I have been working with over the past few months, I tell them this is a really important deadline to keep in mind, even though our deadline for application for the fall semester is March 1st. And we still offer merit scholarships, so just based on your GPA and your test scores. But we do have this earlier deadline for the higher scholarships within the honors college. And lots of universities are going to have different deadlines for their different scholarships. So write them out, stick them on your wall so you have to look at them every day. Tania's third tip was work on your SAT and TOEFL practice test, especially in 12th grade, and even if you're in the 11th grade, and in between the two, definitely spend some time practicing. And in fact, the earlier you can practice, the better, not just to get yourself familiar with the content and the structure of the test, but these are about 4-hour-long tests, and just getting used to doing that kind of academic exam is really important, so that when you go in to take the actual test, hopefully your stress level is a little bit lower. Hopefully you're more acculturated to what it's going to be like. Lastly, her last tip for you all is that once you get a scholarship, it's often contingent on maintaining a certain performance, such as a GPA. So if you get entry into the university with a good scholarship, but then you don't study too much your first semester and your grades drop, you could lose that scholarship. Typically, you will get the scholarship every year for 4 years if you maintain a certain GPA. So that's something to definitely know. And also to ask when you go, and if you see very high scholarships or any scholarship, you can ask, what is the GPA that I should maintain here? All right, so we covered the two big topics here. We're going to now turn towards these last 4 items on the list of how to minimize costs even more. Advanced placement tests are a good way to cut out some of your classes. So some people may be familiar with AP, the first item on this list, maybe IB, the second, maybe even number 5, the British A levels and AS levels. Number 3 and number 4 are tests that you'll find at the university once you're enrolled, typically. So often students pre-application or pre-enrollment aren't familiar with those. But all of these are ways to show that you have a certain level of knowledge on a certain topic or subject that is at the college level. So it cuts down the courses you have to take. For example, let's say you have an A level or an AP exam in, I don't know, let's say physics, then that could, depending on the score you get, typically, also depending on the university, but typically that could count for maybe an intro level physics course at the university. So you've crossed that off. And when we look at how you typically do 12 to 18 credits in a semester, well, boom, you've already finished a few of those. So now you can move on to courses that are more specific in your field, and then maybe even finish faster, or add on an extra class that you're just interested in taking just for your own enrichment. Because in the US, as some of you may know, but in case you don't study just your major. You can taste a little bit of different courses, and also have to take kind of a breadth of courses in your first 2 years. So this can help you a lot with getting to some of either your major courses more quickly, or taking some of the other courses that are available at the university. Also important is looking at cost of living within the regions in the US. Typically, the Midwest and the South are going to have a lower cost of living than, let's say, the West Coast or the East Coast. So for international students, if it's a place that you've heard about a lot, it's probably going to be pretty expensive to live there. Cost of living comes down to kind of how much food, food can cost cheaper in Indiana than in New York, let's say. But also I think the crux of cost of living is rent. So rent, of course, is going to be much more expensive in Los Angeles, in New York, in even, let's say, South Florida. So we talked about the cost of living within the greater region, so Midwest, East Coast, West Coast, South, and also within the city. So different cities have different costs of living, of course. And very closely tied to that is whether you live on campus in a dormitory, let's say, or in housing that's provided by the campus, or if you live off campus. So I live in an apartment here in Indianapolis, and my rent is very affordable. I can also point you to apartment buildings in my same neighborhood that are more than 2 times the cost of mine, and you don't get that much more. So it really, I think, looking within the city also, finding the places that are affordable versus kind of more luxury apartments where people who have more of an income can live, that's going to be important considerations. Is there diversity in the housing within the city or community where you're living? Food, of course, what are the costs of food? And then transportation. Are you living in a place that's pretty walkable? Are you able to take buses? Oftentimes the universities will have a bus that you can use to get around, or maybe for university students there's a discount, or you may have free city buses if you show your student ID. So that's something important to keep in mind as well. Can I get around to the grocery store that has the foods that I'm used to from home, for example? Can I get around to an internship, or is it going to be really hard to get there, and is it going to cost me more? What are your priorities here? You can work as a student in the U.S. On your student visa. So again, U.S. citizens, there are no restrictions for working, but for students coming in on F1 student visas, you can work a maximum of 20 hours a week on campus. So sometimes that's working in the food court, sometimes that's working on the front desk of, let's say, the library. Maybe you are an international student ambassador in the international admissions office, such as Tania, who I just talked about. So during the school year, when school is in session, you can work a maximum of 20 hours a week. And then during the breaks, you can typically work more than that still on campus. These jobs are competitive. That's important to know. All of our universities should have career offices where you can go learn about how to get your resume in shape in order to apply, what is expected when you're interviewing for a job in the US. And also they can help you find different opportunities on campus that may fit what you're interested in, because there are lots of different ways to work on campus, of course. I should note that typically the hourly wage could be maybe $8 to $12 an hour, so that will not pay your tuition. It may pay for your books. Your textbooks can cost you several $100s a year. It may pay for you to go out and get some pizza with your friends on the weekend, maybe go see a movie, but it will not pay your tuition. Of course, it's still helpful, and of course, work experience is always helpful for when you're in the job market after graduation. So there are some special programs for international students as well. There's curricular practical training, or CPT, which is when you're doing an internship while you're still at university, maybe in the summer when you're not taking courses. It may be during the school year. So for example, in Indianapolis, we have the headquarters of a large pharmaceutical company, Lilly Pharmaceuticals, which is in our downtown area. And one of our international students from Nigeria got the opportunity to do an internship there studying diabetes and the markers of diabetes in the human body. I wish I could give you more specifics, but I was not blessed with a scientific mind. But he was able to work here during the school year, get paid for it, and also get the experience through this CPT program, which is encouraging students to get practical experience in their field of study. So, and you can get paid for it again. So, of course, there are limitations and regulations about that, and you would work with your international student advisor on campus who's there to support you every step of the way and make sure that you follow the regulations. OPT, optional practical training, is once you graduate and have earned your diploma, whether from bachelor's or graduate school, and you can work for up to 1 year for most disciplines. If you were in the science, technology, engineering, or math fields, then you can work for up to 3 years in the US still on your student visa. And again, it should be a job within your field, but this is why our universities have career offices and people there to mentor you and advise you and help you find this sort of practical experience so you can really get some experience and also make some money before you head home and start a fantastic career there. A few last tips about saving money. In the US, at the university, you have to buy all of your textbooks, but you can buy them used. So a typical textbook, depending on what you're studying, it could be maybe $80 up to a few $100, and of course that adds up, but you can buy used. And in fact, lots of universities have kind of message boards where students can sell and buy textbooks. So that can cut down the cost by a couple $100, and then sell them, of course, at the end of your semester, so you make some of that money back. Meal plans can be convenient, but cooking at home is always going to be cheaper. So kind of thinking about, is that something that you'd prefer to cook at home? Can you cook? That's important. And is that something, maybe your first year if you live on campus, maybe you live in a dorm, you have a meal plan. After that, you could cut down your cost by cooking at home. So that's one way to save money. And then on-campus versus off-campus housing. So on-campus housing is typically going to be more expensive. So that's living in a dorm or maybe an apartment. IUPUI has kind of apartment-style housing as well that is managed by the university. But we often tell our students, for your first year, it is a good idea because everything's taken care of. You don't have to go to the to set up your internet. You don't have to go to the utilities companies to get your water running, to set up your electricity. Everything is set up. You just pay for the living space and don't have to worry about any of those details. You've got furniture, you have all of that. So that's really nice when you first arrive. But when you live off campus and you're more acclimated to the area, you can certainly save money that way by getting some roommates and sharing your space. And then lastly, student discount. So as I said, the buses in some cities are either discounted or completely free to students if you show your student ID. Any sort of entertainment, any sporting event you go to, Indianapolis has tons of sports teams. There are always student tickets. Any sort of performance or cultural activity, there will always be student discounts. And even at restaurants and local businesses around in the area near the university or even throughout the whole community, you'll find student discounts. So always ask, is there a student discount? Lastly, some advice is to ask current students. Ask them what they do. How do they make ends meet? How do they get a little bit of support in their funding? So, as I mentioned, we have international student ambassadors at our university, and their role is to talk to students who are thinking about studying at IUPUI and can have any questions at all under the sun. We also have a program at IUPUI called International Peer Mentoring Program, which is where students who, new international students to the university enter into a group mentoring model. So there are 2 or 3 current international and American students who are mentoring about 10 new international students for the first year of their studies at IUPUI. And they do everything from walking around the campus and playing fun games to get to know the campus and what resources are available, taking a trip together to the international grocery store that's located off our campus, walking downtown and seeing what opportunities, what kind of fun places are there to eat and to play here downtown. And what do you do when you don't understand your professor, or you don't understand the academic culture, or where do you buy textbooks, or why do all the American students do this thing and you don't know about it? So this is a community that's developed to help our new international students feel comfortable and find their place here. And they can also answer any questions about where to go to find those continuing scholarships, where to go and what tips there are to find some work on campus. And then other ways to kind of save money, because students certainly know much better than I do, for example, the new tips to save money and all of that. I should mention that this is only, of course, these are examples from IUPUI's campus. There are, of course, examples similar to this on every campus that hosts international students across the U.S. As I said in the beginning, we highly value the diversity of opinions and background that our international students bring, and we are here to support them in every way we can. And every university has the support, or should have the support. It just may manifest in different ways. So these are examples that are specific to IUPUI. I think that is all I have in our very broad overview of scholarships and funding this evening. There's my name and contact. You're welcome to contact me with any questions. But I think right now I will turn it back over to Evelyn to take it from here.
Kate, thank you so much. That was a great overview. You did a great job of tackling a tough topic in a short amount of time. We will now take questions. If you put them in the chat, either to just the organizers, or you can also ask. There's a questions function, but it's easier if you use the chat. I'm also right now, since we've had more people come in throughout the course of this hour, I'm going to go ahead and set up a quick poll, if you can answer it, please, about what best describes you. And I think I can make this work. I'm going to launch this poll just so we can get a better sense of who is in the room. So if you can go ahead and answer those questions. Okay, great. It looks like we do have a couple of people who are, mostly we have either parents of a high school student or high school students. We do have a couple of university students or parents of university students. I want to say to everyone that the focus for these webinars is at the undergraduate level, but we are certainly happy to work with students who are looking at the graduate level as well, and we will get to those questions. I have one more poll that we're going to do here quickly, and that's just where you're located, because we have noticed a trend that we're seeing people coming in not just from India but from all over the world. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this one now. So if you can answer the question, where are you connecting from? Is that from India, UAE, Qatar, the US, or other? And appreciate it. So as these are coming in, it's so fun to see the results tabulation. It looks like about 2/3 are coming in from India, but we do have about 30% joining us from the United Arab Emirates. So thank you. And then we do have a few people also joining from the US. Thank you for filling out that poll. I am going to quickly display our we'll get to questions here in just a moment. I just want to display our contact information. Okay. So as you do have questions, if you're a graduate student or an undergraduate student or parent or counselor, you can work with us at the International Knowledge Center. Our advisors, Ben, Yashika, and Becky on the undergraduate side, or Sheila on the graduate side. So there's how to get in touch with us. And then also if you have questions after this presentation for our presenter, Kate, you can get in touch with her as well. And she was kind enough to share her WhatsApp number with us. Please be mindful of the time and not message her at 3 o'clock in the morning. But with that, I will go ahead and move over to the questions. So the first question we had come through is, can international students apply to and attend community colleges? Will a student visa be granted for community colleges? So Kate, can I ask you to address that question first?
Absolutely. Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you for that question. And thank you everyone for your attention. I think I was so nervous to jump off. I didn't say thank you for paying attention during the presentation. Yes, absolutely. International students can attend community colleges. I think that's a great question about whether or not you'll be granted a visa. And I think that typically the best resource for that, you could check with, we could see if our IKC advisors here have any input on that. I think that talking to the embassy and Education USA, if you have an Education USA office in your area, which you should, they can give some good feedback on that. I think often it's helpful to show that you have a plan. So I want to go to this community college for 2 years, and then I want to transfer to this 4-year university. Place like IUPUI, we have a relationship with our Ivy Tech Community College that's in Indianapolis in the same city. And we have an office on both campuses that works with students to help them with a seamless transition. So, that's going to help our students transfer, and that also may be helpful in international students, kind of developing a plan of why they want to go to community college and what their expectations are for afterwards. But I'll turn this back over to Evelyn and the other IKC staff here in case they have any extra input on that question.
I think that you covered it very well, and without getting too deep into that topic, because we have so many questions coming through, we might be able to come back to it. But I'm going to go ahead and charge ahead with some of these other questions as well. So this one is, will tuition cost be somehow different for international students?
Okay, great question. For private institutions, there's one cost no matter if you're an international student or a US student from Hawaii or Indiana or New York. It's going to be the same cost. For public universities, the tuition is cheaper for residents of that state in which the public university exists. So I could attend IUPUI because I'm a resident of Indiana for less money than someone from India, for example. Now, all of this being said, international students, especially if you want to enter the US on an F1 student visa, which probably most of you will have to show that you have financial documentation or finances rather to cover your tuition and your living expenses, which US students of course have to pay living expenses as well, but this is something that international students have to prove, which US students don't at this point.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction to make, Kate, of for the public, it's in-state tuition versus non-resident or out-of-state tuition. So it's not different for an international student necessarily, it's just different for anyone who is not living in a particular state and paying income taxes to be a resident of that state. So the cost for an international student who wants to go study at IUPUI is the same as someone from the state of Texas because they're not a resident of the state of Indiana. Is that correct?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Evelyn.
Okay. And then next question. I am a high school student. Oh, I think that that person was answering the question about, or the polling, and doesn't have, or didn't have a question, at least in that instance. Moving on. My daughter has submitted the online application, but the finance letter from the bank will only be available after the 15th of November. Will this impact negatively her being considered for scholarships?
This is an excellent question. It should not. So I can speak in the case of IUPUI specifically, that absolutely will not make a difference because we will award scholarship based solely on merit, on academic performance and test scores. So in order to get the I-20, which is necessary to get the student visa, we would need to see that letter from the bank. But if that comes after, we can contingently award scholarship based on getting that final financial documentation piece. Then we'll finalize the admission and send off the I-20. So for IUPUI, that should not be a problem. For other universities, I would imagine it's similar. It's a similar situation, but that you may have to talk to the university specifically just to double check.
Okay. Is the November 15th deadline also the deadline for documentation? Is that the last day I can turn in financial documents? Um, I'm hopeful to be considered for a merit-based scholarship. And then they add a personal note. Thanks, Kate. You've been great.
Thank you. So are you. Thank you. So I appreciate that. So yeah, a couple things for IUPUI. Again, our March 1st is our deadline for all fall admission for undergraduate students, and we still have scholarships up to 50% of the tuition then. If you're interested in these higher scholarships by November 15th, we would need to see your academics, so your grades, your transcripts, depending on what kind of curriculum you followed. We would need to see those in high school as well as your test scores. If you're really interested in that, I would say please do send me a WhatsApp message or send me an email and I will help. Obviously, November 15th is on Tuesday, but I can help explain it a little bit more to see what are the next steps you would have to do. But for financial documentation, that can be a last piece. So that's the least of our worries at this precise moment.
Okay, well, we have another question. Most universities say they will award a scholarship after February or March. Is there any way around this to help me make a decision earlier?
That's a good question. I think it may depend on the university. I know that our university, IUPUI, and many other universities will award scholarships on rolling admission. So as they admit students throughout the year and up until the deadline, and if you're admitted and you qualify for a merit-based scholarship, you'll get it. You'll be awarded that scholarship immediately upon admission. Um, so yeah, I would think that you could maybe take a look and see what other universities will offer school scholarships sooner. Um, and if not, I think that still would give you time. February, March still would give you time to consider your options and then go make a visa appointment. Evelyn, anything to add to that?
I would say just in my experience from talking to other universities, a couple of things. One, it's going to depend on the office, the university that you're working with. But I think it is helpful to reach out to the admissions office and say, look, I am trying to decide between you and another university. I need an answer. Because sometimes I think the offices we set up process and we try to make it as streamlined as possible, but there are always going to be some snags, and I think that's something that an admissions officer such as Kate can take back to her director and say, you know, we need this is holding us up. This is preventing us from getting this student to commit to us because we don't know about this scholarship. I'm not saying, Kate, that that's your situation, but it might be the situation in the other case. So I think communicating with the office is a really good move in that direction. But the other thing too is that February, March is not too late to make a decision. I mean, some of it might depend on when your visa appointment is going to be, but we could get into that a little bit deeper with that student specifically. If you want to reach out to either our IKC team or to Kate directly. Moving right along, there's a question about full tuition scholarships. And Kate, you already addressed this, but let's go back to it for a minute. As an international student, can I be eligible for full tuition scholarships at IUPUI?
Great question. So unfortunately at this point at IUPUI, we don't have full tuition scholarships. Our highest scholarship is 90% of the tuition. For international students, I should say. So yes, you could qualify for that. That is the scholarship that has the November 15th deadline, which is coming up very quickly. So contact me if you'd like to learn more about that. But up until March 1st, we have 50% tuition scholarship available for all international undergraduate students.
Okay. If a scholarship would eventually cover most of my tuition and other expenses, why is the CSS and FAFSA information mandatory? And this may not, Kate, I'm not sure if this is a question you feel comfortable answering or if we should ask Yashika to jump in.
Yeah, let's go to Yashika.
And Yashika is one of our advisors at the IKC, and she's based in Bombay. Yashika, can we put you on the spot and ask you to talk for a second about the CSS profile and FAFSA?
Sure. Sorry. Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? We're talking about, the question was if you already have.
Yes, let me go back really quickly. If a scholarship would eventually cover most of my tuition and other expenses, why is the CSS and FAFSA information mandatory?
So first of all, the FAFSA information should only be mandatory if you are a citizen or a green card holder and applying for government aid, and the CSS information is something that is sometimes required based on the university for international students, and international students would need to provide that information to colleges so that they can determine where the students are placed financially and what sort of scholarships either merit or otherwise need to be provided. And so that's on a university to university basis on how that university is using that information. But if it is required for that university, then it is something that you should submit. Again, once you have that information submitted to the university and then they're processing your I-20, which you're going to take to your visa appointment, there's a lot of paperwork that goes into all of that. So that's a question, again, that you would want to ask the university, but for those universities that absolutely require the CSS, it's a good idea to fill it out just so that you're aware of the kind of aid that they'll be able to provide to you. Does that answer the question, Evelyn?
I think it covers it. Again, if people have want to talk about their situation specifically, we are here for you. You can sign up to register for advising at ikcblr.com/register. And then there's also a link for the graduate registration on our website as well. Or reach out to Kate if you have specific questions about what the situation is at IUPUI. As Kate mentioned, Kate, you guys do not require the CSS profile, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Really quickly, just because we have one more minute, we have a question if, hello, I got the Merit Scholarship for IUPUI and also applied for the Chancellor's Scholarship. Can I get both if I am selected, or will I only get one of the two?
Great question. You will get the higher one, the highest scholarship. You cannot get both at once. So if you get the chancellor's, that would be the one scholarship that you get.
Okay. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I apologize if we did not get to your question, but we are here for you. Feel free to, there will be links that you will receive in a follow-up email tomorrow, both with the recording to this webinar and a survey just asking you to let us know how you felt about this webinar and what improvements we can make for the future. Next week, November 19th, same time, we are going to be talking about filling out an application. We're going to try to actually demonstrate filling out an application. We will talk about the Common App. So you may have started applying to some universities, but if you are hung up or if you know anyone else who is a little concerned about starting the process and what you actually need to bring to the table, we're going to step through some of those pieces. Kate, thank you so much. This has been very informative and wonderful. Thank you for giving us some of your Saturday morning to connect with us today.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated this time, and thank you to the IKC who do wonderful things for students internationally. So hopefully hopefully students and parents listening to this will reach out to the IKC and to me if you have any specific IUPUI questions. And thank you again, Evelyn, and everyone else.
All right, everyone, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.